Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning into the platform. I am your host, Velma Alderson, and I just want to thank you for taking the time out to share in my videos. As always, I ask you to go down there and hit that subscribe button. And if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome and welcome back to all of my return viewers. This is great. This is part 2 of our story from the book of Ruth. So hopefully you watched the first video, you did your homework assignment, which was to look up a couple words, and we're ready to finish up with Ruth and Naomi and find out what happens to them. So on the last video, I asked you to look up the word provision and the word proactive. And the reason I wanted you to look up the word provision is because as we get further into the story of Ruth, you're going to see how even before Ruth and Naomi even came to be, God had already provided for the situation that they ended up in. And we're going to look at how the word, I just lost my train of thought, I apologize for that, how the word proactive played in their favor as well. So let's pick up with our story. We left off with Naomi telling Ruth to go and find a field, and hopefully the landowner will let her go behind the harvesters and pick up what they left, okay? That's where the word provision comes in. If you go back into the Old Testament, and Ruth is in the Old Testament as well, but if you go back to the book of Leviticus, and if I get the chapter wrong, please forgive me, but I'm sure it's Leviticus, I'm pretty sure it's Leviticus 19 and 9. In Leviticus 19 and 9, the Lord gives a commandment, gives a decree that when you harvest your field, you are not to go back over it a second time. You're not to over harvest. You're supposed to leave after you go over it one time. Anything that's left is for the widows, the orphans, the homeless. God made a provision to take care of those who could not take care of themselves. So when Ruth and Naomi show up in the book of Ruth, that provision from Leviticus helped them out. Because when Naomi sends Ruth to find a field, the harvesters are out there working and harvesting the barley and the wheat, but they left barley and wheat behind. And that's what Ruth was able to harvest for her and Naomi. Now, Ruth got up early. She was up early out there in the field. I know it was hot. I'm a city girl myself. I have a southern accent now, I think, because I've been in the South so long, but I'm from the Midwest. So we didn't have wheat and barley in East Cleveland. But I could just imagine her out in the fields. It's hot. You have to wrap up to keep thistles and stuff from cutting you, and your hands are blistered and bloody. So harvesting was not an easy job. It was very hard work, and you had to be strong in order to do that. So that's what Ruth was doing. Ruth went out and she found a field and she started harvesting, working hard, going behind the harvesters and picking up food for her and Naomi. Well, a man comes along, and the man is the man who owns the land where Ruth is harvesting. And his name is Boaz. Well, Boaz knows his harvesters. He knows who's on his payroll. He sees somebody out there working that he didn't hire, somebody that he didn't know. So he asked one of his overseers, who is that out there working in the field? Well, of course, everybody had heard that Naomi was back in town and she had brought her daughter-in-law with her. So the guy goes on and tells Boaz, well, that's Naomi's daughter-in-law. She's a widow and she's out here. She's been out here since early this morning. She's only taken a short rest break and got a little water, and she's been out here hustling all day. So Boaz, if I had to guess, I would say that Boaz was impressed by that. He was impressed because everyone knew the situation if you were a widow. So Ruth had basically stepped into the position of a son for Naomi. She was out there hitting that grind, working, hustling for her and her mother-in-law. She was doing what Naomi's son or husband would do if they were not deceased. So I have to believe that Boaz was a little impressed with old girl. Because, I'm impressed with her myself because baby, me and Naomi would have lost some weight on them days because I wasn't going to be able to do it. I'm telling you now, I would not have been able to do it. I'd be like, look, Naomi, you were right from the beginning. I need to go back home to my mama. I'm just going to be real with you. But fortunately, it was Ruth and not Velma because Ruth was hitting that grind. She really was. And Boaz admired that. And the reason that we know Boaz admired that is that when it was time to eat, he invited Ruth to come and eat with him and his harvesters. And after she got finished eating, all she wanted, what was left, she wrapped it up in a napkin. And I'm sure you can guess what she did with it. She took it home to her mother-in-law. But before she got to that point, when she got finished eating, she went back into the fields and continued to work. And Boaz told her, go behind the men with the women, because he had a group of women. And he told her to follow along behind with the women and to stay on my land. He told her, stay on my property, because I'm afraid if you go in someone else's field, they may hurt you. They may beat you up, they may rape you, they may kill you, whatever. Boaz was almost instantly protective of Ruth. So he told her, stay on my land, follow behind the women that work for me, and you're going to be okay. And he told the men to make sure she was okay. And not only that, he told them, when you're pulling the wheat, pull a little extra and just leave it on the ground for her. Because see, remember back in Leviticus, it says, whatever you drop, don't pick it up, to leave it. So Boaz told them to, on purpose, drop a little extra for her. So Ruth had a really good day that day harvesting. She got back to Naomi and she had all this wheat and barley. And Naomi was like, girl, where did you go? Who did you meet today to come back with all of this? And she tells her the story about, I was working on this land and the man came and the man's name was Boaz and we just kind of hit it off and he told me, hey, you can work on my land. Well, Naomi knew Boaz. The Bible tells us that Boaz may have been a brother or cousin of Naomi's husband. Because once Naomi finds out that it's Boaz that Ruth has been working for, she tells Ruth, he is a relative of ours. He is one of our, what they refer to as guardian redeemers. He's one of the men that can come in and take over my husband and my son's property and take care of you. So by now, I'm sure Naomi's like, oh, stuff's starting to come together. Stuff's starting to work itself out. Naomi was getting a little giddy, not for herself so much, but because now she knew there was a good chance that Ruth was going to be all right. So this is a stopping point right here, because I just want to say something just stuck out right there when I was reading and studying that. And what it was is the wisdom of Naomi. Naomi was, of course, old enough to be Ruth's mother, probably even her grandmother. And she was wise. And the Bible tells us to seek wise counsel. But sometimes us, the older women, we have lived and we've experienced things, but because of shame, we don't share our testimony and our story with young ladies that are coming up behind us. And in sharing your testimony and in sharing your story, you may save a young woman a heartache and a pain that she does not have to go through. So we can learn from Naomi in that sense that it's okay to give wise counsel. And young ladies, it's okay to admit you don't know everything and accept wise counsel. But we're going to move on because we're going to wrap this up really quick. Ruth tells Naomi, how nice Boaz was to her. So Naomi tells Ruth, look here, this is what we're going to do. This is what you're going to do. I'm going to try to help you out right here. This is what I want you to do. Get yourself all cleaned up. Go take your nice hot bath. Get yourself smelling good. Put on your best clothes. Put a little something on your cheeks if you got to. Get them lips. Don't make them not be chapped. Come on. Go, you know how we do. We get it together. And then go to the thrashing floor. Now, I should have given you the thrashing floor as something else to look up, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the thrashing floor is. The thrashing floor in the biblical terms was a floor where they would throw down the barley and the wheat, and the animals would basically just stomp around on it to separate it. So Naomi knew that Boaz was going to be at the thrashing floor later that night. Women were not allowed there, only men. And because stealing is not new, Boaz will be staying overnight to watch his harvest. So Naomi tells Ruth, look here, get yourself together, go to the thrashing floor. Don't let anybody see you. And once Boaz has finished working and he's had his dinner and he's had his drink and he is resting, go and lay at his feet. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you. When I was reading and getting up to that part, and I got to the part where she was telling Ruth, to put on some nice clothes and put on your perfume, I'm going to be real honest with you. I was thinking, okay, she's finna tell her to go and lay up with this man. And, because that's what I'm just going to be real with you. That's what I was thinking. But that's not what she did. Ruth was a Moabite. She did not know anything about the Jewish religion. Once again, back to the wisdom and the wise counsel of the older woman. Naomi knew the tradition of the Jewish custom was that when a woman laid at your feet, that was like a marriage proposal. That was basically the woman offering herself to the man. So that's why she had her to lay at Boaz's feet. So Ruth was obedient, went on, did what Naomi told her to do. Sometime during the night, Boaz stretch out, kick that foot out. What is that? It's a woman at his feet. So he asked, who are you? Because, I'm sure it's dark, he's sleepy. Like, wait a minute now, who is this? He realizes it's Ruth. And Boaz is impressed, and he tells her, you could have had any man. You didn't go chasing after the younger men, the richer men. You came here to me. So he was impressed, but he was a man of integrity. And what he told Ruth was, yes, I am related to Naomi's husband. And yes, I am one of your guardian redeemers, but there is another who is in line ahead of me. So in reality, he has the right to claim the land of Naomi's husband and his sons, which would include you too, Ruth. Well, basically we're saying, I want you. I ain't gonna lie. I want you, but somebody else has priority. So I need to go talk to old boy and make sure it's okay with him that he don't want you before I claim you. But he tells her, as sure as God is God, if he does not want you, I will take you. Read it for yourself. That's what he says. So Boaz goes in the tradition of the Jewish tradition to the other person, and he tells them, look, Naomi's husband and sons, they got this land, and Naomi wants to get rid of it, sell it, and you're next in line. Do you want it? So, God was like, I'll take it. I'll take the land and, tell Naomi she got a deal. Then Boaz says, well, wait up now before you say that. She also has a daughter-in-law. So if you take the land, you have to take the son's wife, the son's widow, Ruth. Well, that just changed the whole plan. Oh boy said, no, hold up. I'm not gonna be able to do that because that's gonna mess up my thing now. Because I got my own stuff going on, and you trying to bring me another woman. I don't know if he had a wife that he knew he was gonna be able to run that game on her. I don't know what the situation was, but when Boaz mentioned Ruth, the deal was off. So when he declined, Boaz steps in and he marries Ruth. Now, I'm sure we've all seen and heard the little thing about, I'm waiting on my Boaz. I'm waiting on my Boaz. That is not how the story goes. Ruth was not sitting around waiting on anything. Ruth was working. Ruth was taking care of herself and her mother-in-law. Ruth was out in the fields harvesting. She wasn't looking for nor waiting on a man. She was working. So was Ruth waiting on her Boaz, or was Boaz looking for a Ruth? See, I think we got it a little twisted, because we as women, we want a Boaz because we look at him, he represents a rescuer, someone that comes in the midst of our bad situation and rescues us. But that's not truly the story of Ruth. Ruth was helping herself. She was lifting herself up and had the obligation of also providing for this woman that she looked at as being her mother. So Ruth brought something to the table. She was a hard-working woman. She worked from sunup to sundown and carrying bags of barley and wheat just like the men were. She was a hard-working woman. She wasn't sitting around looking for her Boaz. Boaz found Ruth when Ruth was working and getting her life together and trying to figure some stuff out. She wasn't sitting up looking cute, waiting on Boaz. Boaz saw her and said, who is that working in my field? So ladies, we can't be sitting around looking cute, waiting for Mr. I'm worth $10 million to come driving down the street, and we not bringing nothing to the table. You can't cook, you can't clean, don't know how to take care of a baby, don't know how to keep a house, don't know how to balance a checkbook, don't know how to change a doorknob. You got to bring something to the table, babies. You got to bring something to the table. You want a Boaz, you need to be a Ruth. Now, just real quick, because we're going to wrap this thing up, but we're going to look at the importance of having a son, because I don't want to overlook that. When Boaz and Ruth married, they had a son. And out of the lineage of Boaz and Ruth came King David. King David is a descendant of Boaz, which makes him a descendant up under Ruth. Okay, so when I said in the first video that everything they needed, they had, Ruth needed Naomi, and Naomi needed Ruth. They needed each other. And once Naomi got where she went back home, she didn't forget about Ruth. That became her goal. And Ruth didn't forget about Naomi. And that in itself is a lesson, because all of us are in either one or two positions in our life. And those positions change depending on the day, sometimes depending on the moment. You are either in a position where you can help someone, or you are in a position where you need help. And sometimes when we are in a position where we need help and if someone helps us, when we get out of that position, we forget where we came from, and we forget the people that helped us along the way. But when Naomi helped Ruth, and Ruth had that baby, Ruth told Naomi, this is your son. This is your son. You are responsible for this whole thing coming into play. Not taking any credit from God, but Ruth acknowledged that Naomi was the reason why she did what she did as far as going to Boaz. So that's the story of Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. So ladies, we're not waiting on a Boaz. We're becoming a Ruth. Thank you for tuning into the platform. Peace.